Hello. What's up? How are you? Huh? I'm recording this video. Interesting day here. It's December 11th. Mercury just about to enter Sagittarius. And I know many of you are probably happy for this. Probably happy for Mercury to leave Scorpio. I'm not one of those people, even though I'm smiling, because I know the transits are the transits in astrology. We take it as it comes. But for me, I'm going to miss Mercury and Scorpio in the retrograde cycle. The three trines to Jupiter, the three trines to Saturn, the three trines to Neptune, as we were doing today, this morning at 2 in the morning. So I decided to pop on and make a video about the next maybe 7 days here for a midweek forecast into next week. But that is the big thing off the bat here is Mercury's going into Sagittarius at 2:39 p.m. You'll probably watch this after it's done. I think many people are excited for this. Now, Mercury's had to learn a lot of things here the last month. The Sagittarians, those with Mercury and Sag, you definitely had some lesson learning. The Mercury and Scorpios, I think and I hope, enjoyed the emotional probing of the truth in the water parts of your chart, whether it is the Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces parts of your charts. That's where the grand water trines happen. We are officially away from that now. It's not happening. Jupiter and Saturn are still pretty close together, but the inner body planets from Mercury, Venus, and Mars, it's not happening there anymore. So I think many people that I talk to have been in a deep emotional place for the last month, and I think it's been difficult for them. For my clients and friends and people close, they've been shedding tears and going through the end of things or reminiscing about the past, and whether it's in a shorter cycle or a bigger, longer cycles that have come back up in the last several weeks, that has been the bodies of emotional waters to be swam through. So as I do this forecast, Mercury goes into Sagittarius, still has to go over some places that happened in the beginning of the Mercury retrograde, because Mercury went all the way to 6 degrees Sagittarius. When it did go backwards there for the next 3 weeks, it's hitting 0 when I make this today on Thursday, December 11th. It's not going to be until the 16th, which is less than a week. It's 7:55 p.m. Pacific, December 16th, where Mercury will come back to 6 degrees and kind of pretty much really start to move away from the retrograde. And here Mercury this whole week and the rest of December is going to be moving faster and faster in Sagittarius. And I think hopefully, and I'm saying this to those who've been affected by this Mercury retrograde in a deep way, that when you do say something, first of all, you think something, you ponder over something, and when you do communicate something externally, that it has a bit of focus and not scattered mutability. Right, with Mercury being in Sagittarius, it has focus, and there is truth internally and externally in its expression. All right, so I wanted to start off the forecast that way. We did a Mercury trine Neptune here at 29 degrees earlier in the day. We go into the 12th. Moon will eventually leave Virgo and go into Libra, and it is Saturday the 13th that Mercury then, off the bat in Sagittarius, will make her opportunistic relational aspect to Pluto in Aquarius. And so a lot of these fire planets that we'll be having in the next couple years, whenever they walk into the beginning of being in the first degrees of fire, will be aspected by Pluto in Aquarius and aspected eventually by Uranus and Gemini come next year. So it's the fire and air relationship that happens. I think there's tremendous insight that comes with someone who's got, let's say, fire and air planets between 0 and 2 degrees. Very important. I think there's a freeing and a release, but with depth that happens with Pluto influencing Mercury here on the weekend. That happens at 8:31 p.m. Pacific on Saturday the 13th. And then we get into the 14th. And so this is interesting here because Mars is still in Sagittarius. And earlier last week, we had Mars square Saturn. I talked about this with my members only monthly forecast. I do a monthly forecast now for members only on my Patreon and my YouTube. I talked about Mars square Saturn, how difficult it can be for those immutable signs, and the tension, the Mars wanting to push forward in Sagittarius and Saturn putting the brakes and the boundaries on Mars, and a conflict happens there, and it's very caustic. We did that last week, and Mars has been moving away from that gleefully, I would say. Now that Mercury's in Sag too, we have this movement, right? But it's on early morning, overnight on the 13th to the 14th, and that Mars will then, at the last degrees of Sagittarius, square Neptune. And I think here we have to be very careful. You might be grateful for the week before, actually, of Mars squaring Saturn, because Saturn deals with reality and not illusions. It forces you to look at things and to contemplate, to restructure, to recalibrate through practical ways, not just internally, but externally, and planning for this. And or what you're really planning for is the first 2 weeks of January. And I'll throw that little tidbit secret here at the end of this forecast. But basically, here, Neptune throws its illusionary force on Mars. And I think Mars in Sagittarius might actually, it seems to enjoy this because it's moving away from Saturn. I wish I could move away from the lawnmower and leaf blower in the background, but on this channel, I don't pause. I keep going with the flow. I rise above, right? So saying that, Mars, I think, gets caught up in the illusion with Neptune. And the interesting thing here is that Neptune in Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, and so is Mars in Sagittarius. Pisces and Sagittarius are Jupiter-ruled signs, and we end up by looking up in the sky to see where Jupiter is, and it's in the sign of Cancer and is currently retrograde here. Please be aware of what is real and what's not. And Mars, leaving its square with Saturn, wants to push forward and feels like it can, boundaryless, without having to deal with Saturnian influence anymore. And Neptune comes in and wants to dissolve everything about Mars and Sagittarius. So if one is feeling freed, are they truly freed from a Mars and Sagittarius perspective? Let's say now that Mercury's in Sagittarius, we're dealing with philosophical thought here and what truth means in particular to an individual, to groups of people, to those who might lead groups of people, to, the rhetoric, the philosophy, the mantras, whatever you want to call this stuff. Is it real? Is it not? Are you asking for too much? Does it have any solid underpinnings? And this actually connects to the Mercury retrograde transit we recently had, because I think when Mercury went into Scorpio back there a couple times, it established that focal point, that hyper-investigative focus on what is emotionally, internally, within, and the underpinnings there, and leaving its retrograde cycle and being Sag now, has Mercury in Sagittarius, Mars in Sagittarius, Venus, all this. Have they learned the lesson here of what it means to be focused and what it means to have solid foundations behind philosophical underpinnings, the philosophical word, the expression of all this? So here comes Mars here on the Sunday, my time, on the 14th, squaring Neptune. Now, do those underpinnings get dissolved? Is the truth revealed after the haze of Neptune and the illusions? Are they exposed? We know that several days before here that Neptune stopped going retrograde, and it's at 29 degrees. And Neptune pretty much is going to be out of Pisces at the end of January. It's about a month and a half left after 14 years of being in some weird collective bubble. So, I think you're seeing here, and I'll bet you're seeing conversations here where people are questioning AI, they're questioning knowledge, they're questioning all the things they absorbed lately. Maybe the last 14 years, maybe the last 3 months, maybe this last year. What is real, what is not? And when I discover what is real, is it what I thought it was? And is it part of my code? And you're going to question it. And I think something like these transits of Sagittarius stuff connecting at the last degrees with squares, with Piscean stuff, all of this is questioned, broken down by Saturn, and then dissolved by Neptune, right? So that happens here on the 14th. And also the moon will go into Scorpio later that night. And it is late Pacific time and early in the rest of the world at 11:33 p.m. Pacific that Mars then leaves the illusion, finally, of the square of Neptune, and Mars leaves Sagittarius to finally go in to Capricorn, where it is an engine for that sign and it gets shit done. Are you finally ready here when we get through the end of the year and holidays for most of the world? Well, you finally gonna start to put the plan together and not just mourn and contemplate and stay in a pain cave and get over your tears and then have the fruitful wishes and dreams of a Sagittarius and want to push it, but without any structure? Well, you're going to get it. Whether you like it or not, you're going to get Mars in Capricorn. And if I were you, and you're one of these people who used to be like me back in the day, even as an astrologer, I couldn't stand Capricorn vibes, transits, people, all this kind of shit. It drove me crazy. But then I learned there had certain events happen to my life, and I understood the Saturnian influence of what Capricorn is. And when Mars is there, the ability and the structures that are built in a transit like this that creates a long lasting energy and power and can build anything. So when Mars goes into Capricorn, it is very important to note in the Capricorn part of your chart where this is, but you're going to take all the places that you dealt with this year when mutable signs, from Gemini to Virgo to Sagittarius to Pisces, the wishy-washiness, the going back and forth, the scatteredness, the need for structure, the need for discipline. Mars is your favorite planet the next couple of weeks. Just put it in your head. When Mars is in Capricorn and goes to an Earth sign, it's going to actually sextile in a great opportunity aspect eventually at the end of the transit. It's going to do it with Saturn and Pisces. It's going to do it with Neptune. So, farther down the line. So you want to take this. Now, I kind of threw a little fib at you there because at the end of January, Mars and a lot of these planets are going to be in Capricorn. Some of them are going to connect with Saturn in a trine, and some aren't with Neptune. And that's a timing thing, the transition between Neptune and Saturn going from Pisces to Aries. I'm going way over my head right now. Not that I don't know this, but I have to stay in tune here. To bring it back, Mars and Capricorn transit starts Sunday night, early Monday morning. And if you need something to propel you through the holidays and into all of January, that is your planet. As we move through the 15th and we go into the 16th, as I mentioned earlier, Mercury will then be hitting 6 degrees Sagittarius, finally leaving the retrograde zone and starting to move fast. We go into Moon Sag on the 17th, which is a Wednesday. On the 18th, I could talk about several things. I'll go all the way to the 20th here because I think it's very important of what it's relating to now. Mercury then will be squaring in Sagittarius, be squaring the north and south nodes and pretty much triggering the eclipse story. And I think it is here when we get to late next week, 19th, 20th, 21st, that the opportunities to say something in a way, finally, after months of like, should I say it now or not? And you've heard me on this channel tell you, be careful what you're going to say. You should be observing things, then pick your moments after the retrograde's done. I actually think Mercury squared to the nodes, the eclipse story here on the 20th is one of those moments. I actually think Jupiter and Mercury are on your side. I actually think that at this point, after everything Mercury's been through for the last 2 months, that you actually do know what you have to say. You do know the code behind it. And you'll stand behind it. And you also will have to understand what listening is again, because you'll have to be listening to other people's spiritual code or the mission that they're on or their philosophy and why they do what they do. And are you aligned? Let's say it's a relational situation. Are you aligned with that? And I think there's certain types of truths there that are solid at this point when Mercury squares the nodes. It's still a hard aspect when it happens, right? But Mars already did this, and Mercury's just coming up from the rear to clean the stuff up. The beauty of Mercury is it's never there against you. I think it tricks you at times to do certain things, but Mercury's always trying to reveal, unreveal, expose, come back in the shadows. It's playing a mercurial trickster game to try to get you to understand things. And that's what Mercury does. It rules alchemy, it rules magic, it rules, medicine and how it's applied. Mercury has its gifts. It does what it does. It sends messages back and forth. And sometimes you need to be tricked into the messages by falling into a retrograde and just kind of having to review things. And when you get to points like this where Mercury starts to move forward, you're like, wait a second, I know exactly why I did what I had to do there in the past 2 months with Mercury, and here I am going to apply it, even if it's squaring the North and South Node. For those who've been affected by eclipses this year in Pisces and Virgo, big moment for you. I need you to stand up and say it. You know what I mean? Also on that day at 5:01 p.m. Pacific on the 20th of December, we have the Sun square Neptune. Neptune wants to dissolve the Sun and dissolve its light. The interesting thing is we have another 29-degree moment of the year where we have the Sun at 29 Sagittarius and Neptune at 29 Pisces have their mutable moment here, but we know pretty much the next day that we say goodbye to fall in the northern hemisphere and spring in the southern, and we will have the summer and winter equinoxes happen when the Sun in Capricorn enters, or the Sun enters Capricorn. I don't want to forget about something though that builds up, and there's a reason why I'm doing a weird forecast in the middle of the week and going for a week and a half, and it has to do with a tie-in here. That day too, or later that night, and for those on the 21st in other parts of the world, Venus is going to square Saturn now in Sagittarius. You see what's happening here. Mars has led the way when it was in Sag, squaring Saturn, squaring Neptune. Okay. Now Venus is coming to do it. So those who are affected by these transits, who are at the later degrees of 29 mutable, let me say it to you one more time. You're one of these people. You're a Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sag, 28, 29 degrees. You're a person who has 0 degrees cardinal. You're hugely affected by stuff like this. So Venus comes through to square Saturn. And now, here's the deal. If you're one of these people affected by this, I think you have to say whether you're going to commit to something or not relationally, whether it's intimately or in a work situation, contractual situation. This is what Saturn does. It wants you to understand the big picture, but not from a Jupiterian philosophical view per se, but it wants concrete evidence, concrete proclamations, things that are embedded in stone and on the contract. And Saturn here challenges Venus and Sagittarius, who likes to free flow and likes to have multiple ways of relating, and Saturn's like, focus. It already did this with Mars, but now Saturn's like, you need to focus, you need to look at me, you need to tell me, nay, yay, are you here or not? These are the rules. Do you agree with them or not? If you're going to be doing, a certain type of mission in the world with relating, Saturn's like, I know you want to have no boundaries, but it's my job to put boundaries on you because the relational vision that you have in Sagittarius needs some sort of form and structure so it becomes a reality. And a lot of times planets in Sagittarius just don't want to deal with this kind of stuff. But now maybe they've learned here after the last 2 months in the Mercury retrograde and Mars going through there, all this stuff. You would think that some Sagittarians would figure this out at some point, right? What you don't want to be is one of those people who hasn't figured it out yet, because usually the Saturnian situation that happens is hardcore. So that happens on the 20th to the 21st with Saturn Saturn squaring Venus. It is at 7:03 a.m. Pacific on the 21st that we say Merry equinox to you, with the Sun going into Capricorn. Another off the top of my head quickie forecast. The first week of January and the second week of January is subtly important. And it's because Venus and Mars will make a conjunction with the Sun in Capricorn. If you're looking for the foundations like anybody does at the beginning of the year to set yourself up, to get through the mutableness, to get through the two steps forward, 1 step back, theme of the astrology world and the transits for 2025, where we had to deal with planets going forward and going back and all this stuff. And we keep talking about the fire and air situation that we're about to set off here in 2026 for a while. If you need to make the plan, if you need to create the structure and the step-by-step approach, not necessarily to do everything at once, but to create the plan, I suggest in quarterly elements and 3-month increments, but for the year as a whole. You will do this and have a chance to do it with when Mercury, Venus, and Mars and the Sun will all be in Capricorn. And you'll realize then all the tears that you shed here with the Grand Water Trine, all the revising, emotional revising, the end of a 14-year transit in Neptune and Pisces, the end of a Saturn transit in Pisces for 2.5 years. You're going to have a chance to lay down the plan for the year, and that will come up on another video. I'm working on something else too here, because if you made it this far and you're here, you know, I kind of do my tangential thoughts kind of things here, but there's something deep stirring in me, and it has to do with Neptune. And I'll put that up at some point. It could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be in the middle of the night. Doesn't matter, does it? The time with Neptune. What matters is if you know where you are in your heart, and when you're observing from that place, let's say the last 14 years in the Pisces part of your chart, or let's say the last 14 years as a collective of how we're intermingling consciously and subconsciously, maybe you'll see what I have seen, what I will say on my next video. And you'll get past what I already did a long time ago, shedding tears about the past. Now I'm not about that. I'm about something else. I'm about power, and I'm about dissolving, destroying the past illusions and the distractions. Think about that. Until next time, I'll see you on the next video.